Well, today we are honored to be hearing from two state legislators who have championed unique policy solutions to increase funding for and to improve oversight and to diversify the provision of childcare in their states. Senator Freiberg from Louisiana is one of our guests. Louisiana made incredible gains in terms of its investments in childcare subsidy programs this past year, including dedicated funding to early childhood through allocating 25% of their sports betting revenue to an early childhood fund. And we're also joined by Senator Fields from Colorado, and she's been an advocate for improving and expanding upon the availability of childcare providers and sponsored a Family, Friends, and Neighbor bill that was enacted this past year to ensure that informal childcare providers are high quality and meeting the needs of families. And moderating this panel is Bridget Roman. She's a member of Ready Nation, a membership organization consisting of over 2,000 business executives who are committed to building a skilled workforce by promoting solutions that prepare children to succeed in education, work, and life. Bridget's also an attorney, currently serving as the Chief Legal Officer for Community Choice Financial. Bridget's going to share the business case for investing in early childhood and in childcare specifically. We know that childcare is essential for the workforce of today and in building the workforce for tomorrow. And thank you all for joining us. And now I'll turn it over to you, Bridget.
Thank you, Cynthia. I appreciate that and your kind words. Before we get to hear from our very accomplished panelists, I wanted to start the discussion of the business case with a quote from, a paraphrase of a quote from Nelson Mandela. He said, "Our children are our greatest treasure. They are our future. If we fail to care for them, to feed them, to keep them safe, we tear at the fabric of our society and we weaken our nation." Any business case for bettering early childhood care is really born out of those types of sentiments. In the video that you just saw with Elliot Haspel, you heard essentially the three things that are incredibly difficult to overcome. And our panelists will talk about how they went about assisting with overcoming those challenges. But Elliot Haspel spoke about the expense. He spoke about the scarcity of childcare availability, and particularly those childcare deserts. And he spoke to the quality of childcare. And if you think back to that paraphrase that I just read to you, wasn't President Mandela telling us precisely that we need to invest in our children so that we aren't weakening our nation or the fabric of our society? And that is the essence of the business case. Yes, it's too expensive. Infant and toddler care costs are more than in-state tuition at a public university in 34 states. The scarcity issue is real. We have half of America living in childcare deserts, where kids who need childcare outnumber licensed slots by 3-1, or maybe even worse. And then quality. Only 11% of childcare nationwide is accredited. We need to address these issues because the children are the fabric of our society, and we don't want a weak nation. Business relies on the strength of both of those things, but we have over 11 million parents with children younger than 3 who need quality childcare and simply don't have access to it. That lack of access to affordable, high-quality care costs our economy $57 billion every year. And that's just for parents of infants and toddlers. That $57 billion number is comprised of essentially 3 component parts. $7 billion in lost tax revenue, $13 billion lost by business due to lower productivity and increased hiring and training costs. $37 billion lost by parents due to their weakened career prospects, their inability to work as many hours as they'd like, or having to leave the workforce altogether. The childcare crisis hurts our workforce today because parents are understandably distracted by or even absent from the workplace when they're not distracted. And it hurts tomorrow. Young children who don't have high quality early support can experience worse educational and life outcomes, especially when you consider that the children in the age group we're talking about are in a unique period of brain development. Companies need to focus their energies, their efforts, and their resources on getting skilled workers, and skilled workers need reliable, quality childcare that they can afford. There was an article in Forbes in March of this year that told a better story than one that I can tell, that about Helen Meyer, the mother of twin boys. In March of 2020, when the pandemic hit, Meyer's startup company failed, and simultaneously, the childcare provider for her twins shut down. She became a stay-at-home mom, not because she wanted to, but because she had to. She started to apply for jobs, but had to turn down opportunities because she found that access to childcare was either not safe, not reliable, and certainly not of the quality she expected. She started researching childcare to better understand why a generation of parents, mothers in particular, were fleeing the workforce. In July of 2020, Meyer reached out to several parenting communities and asked for some input on childcare solutions that they were seeking. She received 2,000 responses in 1 week. By October of 2020, she had started a business called Otter. It's an online platform to link parents with quality childcare providers. By January of 2021, Otter had launched in a second city and onboarded its 1,000th caregiver. By July, Otter was serving 3,500 providers. The childcare crisis predates the global pandemic. Childcare was already unaffordable for 63% of parents. Half of families, as we already discussed, live in childcare deserts. 1 in 3 working families struggle to find childcare, and only 10% of that childcare is quality. Bottom line, and we're going to see this and hear this from our 2 panelists, childcare is a bipartisan issue. Policymakers like Senator Fields and Representative Freiberg, whom you'll hear from shortly, understand that we need to invest in childcare so that the cost to working parents are reduced. There are more slots for kids and greater availability in more areas, especially the rural ones, and quality is incentivized. So with that, and in the vein of bipartisanism, we do have 1 Democrat and 1 Republican. It's not important who's who, because both of them recognize that the important issue here is the kids. It's the fabric of our society and the future of our nation. So with that, as we already heard, Rhonda Fields is a state senator in the Colorado legislature. She served 3 terms in the Colorado House of Representatives before being elected to the Senate in 2016. And Representative Barbara Freiberg serves in the Louisiana state legislature. Prior to her election to the legislature, she taught high school for 30 years. So she was on the front lines of seeing the importance of early childhood opportunities. And she also served on a local school board. So welcome to both of you. And I'd like to start by inviting each one of you to talk about the child care incentives available in your respective states, and what you did and why you did it. So Senator Fields, may we begin with you?
Yes, thank you so very much for having me. It's so good to be a part of this discussion as we talk about kids and families, because I can tell you right now, families are struggling. Ever since COVID, we've seen many women kind of leave the workplace because it's hard for them to, let's say, homeschool because schools were closed, or even to get back to work. And so in the state of Colorado, we've done lots of things to kind of get relief and subsidies to families, but we have not done enough. One of the things that I'm proud of is Senate Bill 1295, which just passed this year, which was able to invest more dollars into providing subsidies, not only for the daycare locations, but also for training and development for those that do the kind of work. As you know, the workers, the people that are in these centers don't make a lot of money. In fact, you can probably work somewhere else at, let's say, Home Depot or maybe Starbucks and make more than some of these childcare workers are making. So we need to invest in increasing their salary, their certification, as well as in getting more opportunities for us to have facilities in homes. Rural Colorado is really impacted by the lack of accessibility to childcare in the state. So some of the funding that we put in 1295, make sure that we try to address accessibility and affordability, especially in rural Colorado. So our governor, who really helps, has started this about 4 years ago, investing in our early learners as it relates to full day kindergarten. It's hard for you to be at work and then you have to leave at 2 o'clock to pick up your kids. So now for the last 4 years, we now have funded 4-day kindergarten. And we've also invested in preschool education to make sure that kids are getting a good head start so they know their alphabets and their numbers and the letters before they go to kindergarten. So there's lots of work to be done, but families are still struggling because of the wages and because of the affordability of housing and trying to make all ends meet. Sometimes our kids are cut short because their parents or those families cannot afford the cost of childcare.
Representative Freiberg, what about you? Can you talk a little bit about the Louisiana experience?
Absolutely. I am thrilled to be here this afternoon with y'all, Bridget. We have worked very hard in our state to try and make some improvements in early childhood. I've got to tell you, back when I first ran for school board, I came out of the secondary environment, as you just mentioned a little while ago. But my daughter said, "Why would you want to run for school board?" And I said, "Because I would like us to have universal early childhood education for everyone." And she said, "Mom, that's never going to happen. You can't do that." And I said, if I didn't think I couldn't do it, I wouldn't be running. I'm running because I think I can. So that is one of the primary goals I've had in every elected position I've held. I left the school board to go to the Metro Council to try and work on some early childhood things, got that done. And now I am in the legislature trying to continue that process so that I can keep my promise to my daughter. I hope I live long enough to do that. I will tell you that I am on the Education Committee. So most of the legislation that deals with this, except for the budgetary things, does come through education. I want to back up a little bit and set the stage. Back in 2012, our legislature passed legislation that put all early care and early education programs under the Department of Education. In 2013, they established a community network in every single community in the state. In 2015, they put in a rating system that was a little bit controversial, but anyone who accepts public dollars now has to be rated as an early care center. We established in 2018 the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission, and it has really made a difference in our state. They're the ones who collect the data. They create proposals for the legislature. They are trying to expand access for all children birth to 3 in our state. In 2019, we started a larger network, the Ready Start Network, to expand access again. So let me talk about last year's session. It was an historic session. And just as Elliot mentioned earlier, I don't know if we're all real prepared for that fiscal cliff that's coming. But here's what we did. As someone already mentioned, 25% of sports betting up to $20 million will go to early childhood. all parishes are allowed to repurpose juvenile justice funding to include preventative services such as increasing access to early care and education and investing in early care and education infrastructure. Another bill put $44 million in state funding to improve early care education, $25 million to expand our CCAP program, which is for our at-need children, and around $18 million to improve the rates offered to existing four-year-old programs. We put $40 million of unspent money that we had in the general budget into the Early Childhood Education Fund, but that's one-time money, and we'll have to find $40 million next year if we're going to fill that gap. We had legislation that maybe is still good. I hope districts will listen, but it requires school districts to work toward offering year-round, full-day pre-kindergarten to all four-year-olds. And finally, we reauthorized this commission that I told you is so important, our Early Childhood Care and Education Commission. So we made a huge down payment this year on what we hope will be a very positive future and just the beginning of bigger and better things for our state.
Representative Freiberg, that was a very interesting timeline, but I'm curious, was there something that set in motion and triggered the legislator into action for the benefit of younger children?
I believe it was the business community who said, as we've talked about earlier, we have jobs that need to be filled. We have areas in our state that just have to be propped up by better education access. And I can tell you that, early childhood education is that foundation, like a house. And if that foundation isn't strong, then we can't get our students to the place that we want them to be. And this reliable workforce probably was the key to saying, we've got to start early. There was a former chancellor of the higher ed in our state who famously always said, college begins in kindergarten. Well, we would say college begins at birth, and that's what we're working toward.
Interesting. And Senator Fields, what about in Colorado? Was there a trigger event or series of events that pushed the legislature into action?
Yeah, I think that education has always been a core value in the state of Colorado. And so when I think about what triggers some of the recent events, it has to be the governor. The governor, when he ran, his platform was all about focusing in on kids and families and learning and starting early and working upstream to prevent some of our kids who may be troubled getting into our criminal justice system. So in the past 5 years, he's gotten lots of momentum for us to invest in early learning and anything that supports student success. So we have lots of dollars that we funded all over to just making sure that we're doing right by kids. And so it's not a political focus in Colorado. It's all about making sure that we're preparing young people to take their places in the future tomorrow.
And Representative Freiberg, you mentioned that the business community triggered some of the actions in Louisiana. How can the business community most effectively push for these sorts of legislative changes and get the message out about how important early childhood development is to future members of the workforce, future collegiate students, to all sorts of future endeavors?
That's a good question, and I'm going to answer it the best I can. I'm going to start with a quote from Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan once said, "Status quo, is Latin for the mess we're in." We were in a mess, and our mess was driving people out of our state because the economy was not good. Businesses couldn't find qualified people. Our education system in Louisiana ranks 49th in quality, 40th for safety, 47th for dropouts, 47th for the median ACT scores. We have 60% of our kindergartners entering kindergarten not ready to learn. We must do a better job if we're going to ever feed the pipeline at the other end. Now, I would tell you that we have chambers throughout the state who have been very involved in this process. We have the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, which is also very involved. And for better or worse, they have a very strong lobby. And their lobbyists are all over the legislature. And LABI, Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, has a very strong platform that embraces education, birth through college, basically. And so the push from these folks helps to push legislators and even the governor to do things to try and solve the problem. We probably have 83% of our 4-year-olds that are served. These are 4-year-olds that are in need, but less than 15%, goes back to some of the statistics you were quoting earlier, less than 15% of those children who are birth to 3 and in need have access. So we have a long way to go.
And Senator Fields, I'm curious, are you seeing a similar interest from business leaders in the state of Colorado?
Yes, we are. I can tell you the comments that are being made are similar to what we see in Colorado. The business community is extremely engaged in education because that transfers into labor, into the production of our economy. Because without a skilled workforce or labor, no one is really making that kind of money. And what we're seeing in Colorado, everyone's looking for labor. I mean, you can't drive around without seeing a for hire sign. And there's people who are not working. And what I'm told from business community is that they believe that we need to provide more childcare opportunities. So we're seeing them take the initiative in private partnerships with the state to develop facilities within those companies. So we have, like, some of the schools are now providing building childcare centers. Some of the hospitals. We're just seeing more and more opportunities where we're seeing collaboration between business as it relates to the need of childcare for families, because it affects all workforces. You can be a doctor, a nurse, or a janitorial worker or a teacher. And if you have kids and you want to pursue your career, on everyone's mind as a parent is making sure they have access to quality care. And we just don't have enough to meet the need and the demand that's out there right now.
Senator Fields, Representative Freiberg talked about something I thought was interesting, which is the dedication of streams of money from, in her state's case, it was gambling, I believe.
Right.
Is Colorado considering a similar dedication of funds?
Well, that was interesting. I did take note of that because I would like to snatch some of that money as well. We would call that here sin tax because we're always looking to tax, let's say, alcohol or sugar or something like that. It's not very popular. When we do that, no one wants to see increase of taxes. But we have to find a revenue stream, and we have to make better and bigger and stronger investments in childcare. So I'm interested in that. What we did do with some of the money that we got from the feds is that we were able to repurpose some of the funds and the rebates that went to folks that were incarcerated. And we redirected some of those funds. So there are some opportunities for us to look creatively in reference to how we can funnel more money to help in this endeavor.
Well, even though there's work to be done, do we think that we're close in Colorado and Louisiana to solving or being en route to solving the crisis?
Well, I'll just speak since I started talking. I just think it's an issue that we just can't ignore anymore. I mean, when you see that people are spending the cost of it, what it would cost for a mortgage payment or a quarter semester of tuition for childcare, it's just heartbreaking when you want to see families, kind of contribute to society and do the work, but yet they can't because their focus is on the development and the well-being of their children. So we have to get all the right minds and the people in the same space so that we can come up with, solutions and strategies to move forward. Because right now, I believe we're getting close to that cliff.
And Representative Pfeiffer, any comments along those lines?
Well, yes, it was interesting. Someone said something to me the other day about, children are not like investing in children's not like a capital outlay project in the legislature, because capital outlay is a one-time money and you fix the problem. With children, it's not one-time money and we fix the problem. It's money that has to continue from year to year to year. So in our state, the number one thing we still have left to do, and I would tell you, we are far from where we need to be. And I had to laugh. The sports betting is not the only sin tax that goes toward early childhood education. We have several more that go to early childhood education. But we have to find an investment of over $115 million for the next at least 10 years if we're going to begin to meet our goals. I had to laugh or be upset. Earlier today, I was listening to a radio show, and they were talking about one of the gentlemen in our state who's running for Congress. He's one of our current senators, and he's running again. He has $36 million in his account right now. And I thought, 36 million, what could we do with $36 million toward early childhood education? So funding that would be continual, that would be year to year, not one time like the 40 million this year. We have got to find a way to make sure we have the funding. We also must make sure that all our families have access. Right now, they do not. And we know, as someone said earlier, that in our economy, it's about a $10 billion economic deficit. 1.3 billion dollar deficit we face each year, and it's over 760 million just to the businesses. But if we invest this 115 million in the next 10 years each year, we will have a $12 billion increase to our budget. So it's very, very important. Y'all talked earlier about quality providers and certified teachers. We've had some tax incentives to get people certified, but we have to continue to get good teachers in our schools. But when you're making $9 or $10 an hour, and you can go to, as someone said earlier, Target and make a much higher salary and have benefits, it's hard to keep our teachers. So we've got to do something to incentivize our teachers to stay and to be certified. We have to improve our early childhood community networks. These are working very, very hard throughout the state to try to find solutions for more access for parents and also other methods of funding early childhood throughout the state. So all of these are very, very important, and we're just beginning. We have a long way to go.
Senator Fields, you mentioned the importance of getting the right minds at the table. Are the right minds joining the table? Are they anxious to participate, and are they bringing the much needed messaging?
Yes, I believe that the right minds are ready because it's having a ripple effect across all industries and across all organizations. And so I think people are ready for the right idea and the right funding source. We just haven't put a framework behind it right now.
Representative Freiberg, you mentioned a number of statistics that helped catapult the legislative action. Being very low in things like, SAT scores or ACT scores and reading comprehension and things like that. Are you using those metrics on a go-forward basis to assess the efficacy of the initiatives that have been undertaken?
You make a very good point, and I was going to try and say that. Everybody who runs for office believes education is one of the most important things we ought to be looking at in the legislature. And early childhood is probably the most important element in the education system, particularly in our state where we have, counting Alice and poverty, over 51% of our young people find themselves there. So with the help of groups like the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission, we are digging data. And when you bring the data to the table and you show the data to the legislators and the business leaders and the advocates and the parents, all come to the legislature and say, look at the data. The data tells what the story is. And the story is just not great right now. So, yes, mining the data is extremely important in our state. And I think it's made a difference. The problem comes, everybody knows the data. Everybody believes the data. But where's that money going to come from? If it's coming from my little pot in this parish or that pot in that parish, that's where we need to get more buy-in, where this is something we all have to do together. And it's the only way we're going to improve our state, the only way.
Are you getting resistance to that message?
You don't get resistance. They agree. The resistance comes when you try to find the funds. What are you going to take the money out of to put it into? And that becomes the difficult process. So sports betting, which is new, was an easy bucket to get some money. So we just need to find other places in our budget that we can move some funds from.
Or new buckets.
Yeah, I don't know what those are going to be, but yeah, new buckets would be great. Hey, how about the federal government? That would be a nice new bucket.
Good point. I'm curious, Senator Fields, I know we lost you video-wise for a second. Hopefully we didn't lose you with audio. But
I'm back.
Yeah, similar question to you about the use of those sorts of statistics, to measure the efficacy of the new initiatives.
That's extremely important. In Colorado, I'm quite sure in other places, we try to make sure that we're using evidence-based data to drive and inform decisions that we do. So a lot of times, if we fund you to do some of this work, then you have to make sure that you are performing at a certain metrics as it relates to what we expect for you to deliver. And if you're not able to deliver that, then that can kind of change your funding patterns as it relates to money that comes to the state. But we're very prescriptive in reference to what the state expects from you in order to get access to these fundings as it relates to home visitation or early childhood development. And we too have a coordinated approach in the state of Colorado, where we have an administration that looks at early childhood development that starts really early on at birth, really all the way up to first grade, to make sure that we're coordinating our outreach efforts. And it's very, very prescriptive. It's very strategic, and it's refreshed from time to time, just to making sure that we're doing relevant work to make sure that we're preparing all the young minds out there.
And I would assume part of the difficulty is that you can't expect a 1 year or 2 year return on investment. This is a return on investment that will be years in the making.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I think the other speaker mentioned this is something that you just can't start and stop, because the way once you learn something, you really don't unlearn it. I know we've had learning loss, but what you've learned, you've learned. We just need to build on that learning strategy, and that is incremental. Like I'm still learning today. That's why we have libraries. Libraries are full of books, and we haven't all achieved our full potential of everything, and neither have our kids. So it is an investment that's ongoing, just like we do for adults in any career. It's professional development along the way.
And I am curious as to your respective perceptions of what more the business community can be doing to help move the ball towards the goal line.
Well, the business community right now, they're hurting a little bit. I mean, the economy is back, but they're having to change the way we do business in the stores. Sometimes hours are cut. You don't see many 24-hour stores that are open 24 hours. They may close at 11 or 10, or you go to a store and you have to go to one area where you can get the checkout. Everyone is modifying the way we're doing work because of what COVID has brought to us as a nation and as a state. And so what I've been seeing the business community do is to help us understand what they need as it relates for workers. And so they have partnered with community colleges and with universities as relate to preparing folks, making sure that sometimes it's maybe you don't need 4 years. Maybe we can do that program in 18 months and get people to work where they're earning a very meaningful wage. So they're at the table, they're engaged because they're seeing that they're not able to deliver the standards of what they want to because they're short workforce. So they're ready to get involved. They're ready to add their ideas. They want to support their workers because they believe that's the culture and the mindset that they want their organization. So they're open to listening to the struggles that families and women and people have and how business can make modifications and maybe not be so rigid and to be much more agile and flexible. So I find that they're good partners. And when you do partner with them, it gets them on board before they come up with lots of oppositions about why it's not going to work.
Excellent point. I'm curious about the same question with the Louisiana business community. Is there more that the business community can do to help get that ball across the goal line?
I would hope the business community would make a total effort to support childcare in the community and childcare for each business for its workers. In Louisiana, and I know this was mentioned earlier, but in Louisiana, 1 in 7 residents with a child under age 4 have turned down a promotion because of childcare issues. Half of the residents with a child under age 4 reported missing work regularly. 1 in 6 had to quit a job. 1 in 13 had been fired because of childcare issues. So if the business community were to rally around what can we do to have childcare and early childhood education for our employees so we're not losing them and they're not having to drop out and we're bringing the best out of them. I mean, in our city, the hospitals tend to have childcare centers at the hospitals. There are some businesses that have childcare centers at the business. Those are the kinds of things I think business needs to think more about because they will benefit, our community will benefit, and our state will benefit if they will put their support toward these community centers.
Interesting. I see we're joined by Cynthia Osborne, who's probably got a burning question or two herself since she joined us. Welcome back, Cynthia.
Well, thank you for having me back to the panel. And I've really enjoyed listening to all that you have been sharing with each other. And I did have a question. Bridget, I think that one of the wonderful things that Ready Nation has done is to help to balance the conversation about the purpose of childcare as having two purposes. And one is to meet the needs that we have today of making sure that we have the ability for parents to be able to go to work, that they have a place to leave their children that is safe and enriching, and it allows them to work. And you have all been addressing that crisis. But the other thing that Ready Nation talks about and that we know from a developmental perspective is that childcare is also about learning, and it's about enriching the learning environment for children so that they are a better workforce for tomorrow. And I'd love to hear all three of you reflect on how we can try to get that second message infused more into the conversation. We've done more of that for pre-K. We've certainly done that for kindergarten. I think when most of us were children, kindergarten was the way that pre-K is today, a new thing, not necessarily universal and widespread, but it's become something that we all believe is really important for children's educational development, and pre-K is moving that way. In the earliest years, we know that that's where learning is taking place the most. How do we build that argument into all the things that you're also talking about in terms of making sure that folks can work? How do we make sure that we build in that children have an opportunity to learn in these earliest years and these enriching environments? I don't know if, Bridget, if you wanted to start with what you guys have been talking about in Ready Nation and how you've been articulating that dual message.
Well, it's certainly a very important element, and one that I guess in my view is wrapped around what we've been spending the majority of the time talking about, because we've been talking about the importance of quality childcare. And in my view, the quality of the childcare is that enriching educational experience, because we know that at that young age, the brain is a sponge that is eager for knowledge and information and learning. And it's such an ideal time to take advantage of that sponge-like brain, so that, as somebody said earlier, the 3-year-old who you're educating today, you are in fact educating them for high school and beyond, whatever that beyond may be, whether that's the immediate workforce, whether that is some sort of vocational or trade education, or whether that's university level or community college level. It really begins at that age, and developing that enthusiasm for learning, coupled with the experiences that demonstrate to that young mind that learning is fun. And if it's fun, we want to do more of it. So that it to me is all one and the same, but I'd be curious to hear from Representative Freiberg and Senator Fields, their thoughts on the matter.
So you want me to go? I'll go. I think almost every legislator can give you a statistic. Now, whether it's right or wrong, but they'll tell you, we know 80% of the brain development takes place birth to age 3, 90% by age 4. So this is very, very important. We need to talk about this brain development, and it has been very persuasive in the legislature. It's very interesting, though. It has been in the business community also. Last week, I was at a forum in New Orleans that was a STEM-focused and small business forum. And they introduced the day with a series of slides. And I think it was the third slide was early childhood education and how it affects everything in our state and the pipeline to jobs later. So I think this brain development and how important these first 4 years are is just critical, and we need everyone to know that. I would also say that the accountability system we put in place, I told you back in 2015, I think, will look at what is being done academically with students to help prepare them for where they need to be. So we are looking at it from several different angles, and I know there's more we probably can do.
Senator Shields, I would love to hear what you are thinking about this important question.
Thanks for the question. I can tell you that most people get it in reference to the importance of early childhood learning. And the reason they are is because at one point they were a child, or they know someone that's raising a family. And we see what happens when someone is delayed or is not able to be at the intellectual level that they should be because of maybe whatever reason it might be. But most people get the importance because someone taught them along the way. And sometimes, your parents are your first teachers in reference to learning some of the basic things like manners and those kinds of things. And then you go on and get formal development and training and learning. But what we're seeing now in today's time is not everyone comes from a family where they can teach one. And that's why home visitation and early childhood development is so important, because it supplements what a family may not know and can still invest those kind of ideas and thoughts into young minds. But most people understand the importance of quality education early on. And when you see that connectivity in the young kid's mind, when they discover something, it's just everyone wants to see a child to be able to embrace their full potential of who they are and what they can become. And it starts by, reassuring them and teaching them and investing in them. And I think it was Nelson Mandela who said something like, you can always tell a nation by how they invest in their kids. And so if we have a nation that's full with kids in poverty, then it's real easy for a lot of things to happen where they don't have the resources or the means to be able to learn everything that they need to know. So we do have lots of work to do, but I think that's the easiest sell, is to share the positive benefits of learning, because we keep them from all kinds of dangerous things. We teach them how to behave in school. We teach them how to, cross the street. I mean, if we can just do early learning as it relates to making better decisions so that your judgment's outcome, it's just a better investment. I read somewhere that for every dollar that we invest in early childhood education, we're investing, it's like $5 in return. So it makes sense to invest upstream versus, waiting until a crisis happens.
That's a great note on which to end. And I can't imagine a better exclamation point on this discussion. Thank you so much, Senator Fields, Representative Freiberg, and I will turn it back over to you, Cynthia, for any closing comments.
Well, thank you all. Really, this was just wonderful. Thank you for sharing all your insights and your efforts. This is such a critical policy area that states are all grappling with. And I think that you've really illuminated how it is that they can begin to address this crisis. So thank you. And thank you, Bridget, for the work that you're doing, and all the folks at Ready Nation. Thanks again.
Thank you.